We will continue our discussion on Parkinson's disease drugs. In the previous lecture, we discussed about levodopa. Apart from discussing various other things regarding pathophysiology of Parkinson's, the neurotransmitter imbalance, the classification, and what we had seen that there are two broad categories of anti-Parkinsonian drugs to take care of the neurotransmitter imbalance that has happened in Parkinson's disease. That is, there is increased activity of cholinergic fibers and there is decreased dopaminergic activity. So you need to decrease the cholinergic activity. So you can decrease the cholinergic activity by using centrally acting anticholinergic drugs, and there are various ways through which you can increase the dopaminergic activity. One was by using the dopamine precursor such as levodopa. The other ways are to directly act on the dopamine receptors through dopaminergic agonist drug, or you can inhibit the metabolism of dopamine by inhibiting the MAO-B enzymes, or by inhibiting the COMT enzymes, or by inhibiting its reuptake. And there is one category of drug which increases or which enhances the release of dopamine apart from inhibiting its reuptake, such as amantadine. So let us first start with the dopamine receptor agonist. We have already discussed about levodopa and why we combine levodopa with carbidopa. What are the advantages of combining levodopa with carbidopa? Now let us start our discussion with dopamine receptor agonist. Now dopamine receptor agonist, two subcategories are there: ergot dopamine receptor agonist and non-ergot derivatives. So in the ergot derivative, we have drugs such as bromocriptine or pergolide. Then in the non-ergot derivative, we have ropinirole, then pramipexole. Now bromocriptine and pergolide both are the ergot alkaloids. Bromocriptine, apart from being a D2 receptor agonist, it has also got a partial D1 receptor antagonistic activity. Whereas pergolide is both D1 as well as D2 receptor agonist. And if you compare bromocriptine with pergolide, though both are ergot alkaloids, but pergolide is much more potent than bromocriptine, and it has got higher affinity for D2 receptors compared to bromocriptine, and it has got longer duration of action. Now, as far as treatment modalities of Parkinson's disease is concerned, it is said that it is better to start with drugs such as dopamine receptor agonist. Or in mild cases or in drug-induced Parkinsonism, you can start with centrally acting anticholinergic drugs. But in idiopathic Parkinson's disease, as far as possible, start with the dopamine receptor agonist drug and then monitor the patient And if there is insufficient response or inadequate response, then you can add levodopa with carbidopa along with the dopamine receptor agonistic drug. Or if the patient is already on levodopa plus carbidopa, and as I have told you, on chronic uses of levodopa with carbidopa, the wearing off phenomenon starts appearing. There is on-off phenomenon. So if the wearing off phenomenon has started and patient has started experiencing on-off phenomenon, you can use dopamine receptor agonistic drug as an adjunct to the levodopa plus carbidopa. But pergolide, though it has got higher affinity to D2 receptor and has got longer duration of action, it is withdrawn from the market because of higher incidence of valvular heart disease that it causes. So there are the non-ergot derivative such as pramipexole or ropinirole. Both are selective D2 receptor agonistic drugs. But pramipexole in addition has got the D3 receptor agonistic activity. And as I have told you, as far as the role of D2 receptor and agonistic drugs are concerned, they can be of use in cases of wearing of phenomenon or on-off phenomenon seen with the levodopa carbidopa. Or if you start with dopamine receptor agonistic drug to the initially diagnosed cases of Parkinson's disease, it can delay the need for levodopa carbidopa, or as far as possible you can delay the start of levodopa and carbidopa, because with the chronic use of levodopa and carbidopa, the problem of wearing of phenomenon and on-off phenomenon appears. So we have discussed levodopa carbidopa, we have discussed in the previous class. We have discussed about dopamine receptor agonistic drugs and what are their roles in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. Now let us focus on the third category of drug among the drugs which actually enhances the dopamine activity. These are the drugs which actually inhibits the metabolizing enzymes. First we will discuss about COMT inhibitors and what are their roles in the treatment of Parkinson's disease is concerned. Now we discussed about levodopa, we discussed about why we combine levodopa with carbidopa. Okay, the basic purpose of combining levodopa with carbidopa was to prevent its peripheral decarboxylation to dopamine, so that more and more amount of levodopa can cross the blood-brain barrier. Now what happens if you inhibit the peripheral decarboxylation of levodopa by giving carbidopa? It will get converted into 3-O-methyl dopa through this COMT enzyme. Are you getting my point? You have blocked the conversion of levodopa to dopamine peripherally by using decarboxylase enzyme. So this levodopa will get converted into 3-O-methyl dopa or 3-OMD by the by COMT enzyme. And this 3-OMD or 3-O-methyl dopa, what it will do, it will compete with levodopa for transportation across the blood-brain barrier. Are you getting my point? You have blocked the conversion of levodopa to dopamine by blocking the deep carboxylase enzyme by using carbidopa. Now this levodopa is getting converted into 3-O-methyl dopa through COMT enzyme, and this 3-O-methyl dopa is actually competing with levodopa for crossing the blood-brain barrier. So what ultimately it can lead to? It can lead to poor therapeutic response to levodopa, and it may also contribute to wearing off phenomenon and on-off effect seen in patients taking levodopa. So if you use only levodopa with carbidopa, this problem of less therapeutic response with the levodopa carbidopa combination and the appearance of wearing off phenomenon and on-off phenomenon will be more pronounced. So imagine a scenario wherein you are using peripheral decarboxylase inhibitor such as carbidopa along with levodopa, and you are also using COMT inhibitor. So what it will do? More amount of levodopa will be able to cross the blood-brain barrier, and you can also avoid the less therapeutic response seen with levodopa and carbidopa combination, and you can, to an extent, you can also avoid the wearing off phenomenon and on-off phenomenon. So among the COMT inhibitors we have entacapone and tolcapone. With tolcapone, the advantage is that it not only inhibits COMT peripherally, but it also inhibits COMT centrally, and it has got longer duration of action. But the problem with tolcapone is that it is highly hepatotoxic. So because of that, it is less preferred. Whereas entacapone is only inhibiting the peripheral COMT, though its duration of action is shorter, but it is not leading to hepatotoxicity. Now, depending upon the patient's or case to case basis, you can decide upon which drug among these to choose. Both entacapone and tolcapone are available as fixed dose combination with levodopa and carbidopa. Okay, so first we have understood what is the rationale for combining levodopa with carbidopa. Now we have understood what is the rationale for combining levodopa and carbidopa with COMT inhibitor. You have understood? So if you can see here, tolcapone is inhibiting both peripheral as well as central COMT, whereas entacapone is only inhibiting peripheral COMT. But the problem with tolcapone is, what is the problem with tolcapone? Though it is longer acting, it is inhibiting both peripheral and central COMT, it is hepatotoxic. So if you combine levodopa and carbidopa with COMT inhibitor, you can increase the plasma concentration and duration of actions of levodopa and carbidopa, and you can reduce the dosage of levodopa and carbidopa, and you can also decrease the fluctuation in their response, and the chances of wearing of phenomenon and the on off phenomenon will be reduced. Now let us understand about MAO-B inhibitors. Now MAO-B inhibitor such as selegiline, it is a selective irreversible inhibitor of MAO-B at normal doses, at normal therapeutic doses. So if you inhibit MAO-B, you will inhibit the dopamine metabolism in the brain, and it will lead to increase in level of dopamine. So you can use MAO-B inhibitor in the early stages of Parkinson's disease in patients with very mild symptoms, or you can use it with the purpose of delaying the need for levodopa and carbidopa. And same as that of COMT inhibitor, MAO-B inhibitor can be added to levodopa and carbidopa to reduce the wearing of phenomenon or reduce the incidence of wearing of phenomenon, to reduce the motor fluctuation, and to increase the time of effect of levodopa and carbidopa combination. Are you getting my point? Are you understanding? Now tell me the ways through which dopamine gets metabolized. Either it can get metabolized through the reuptake phenomenon, or it can get metabolized through the COMT enzyme or MAO-B enzymes. Now, in a normal therapeutic doses or in a low dose of selegiline, it only irreversibly inhibits MAO-B enzymes, and that is what you actually want in Parkinson's disease, because the idea is to increase the level of dopamine. But if you use very high doses of selegiline, it will start inhibiting MAO-A also. So that can be problematic. But in normal therapeutic doses, it do not inhibit MAO-A. It selectively inhibit MAO-B. There is selective irreversible inhibition of MAO-B only. Now, two things you need to understand: the role of MAO-B inhibitor in the context of certain neurotoxin induced Parkinson's disease, or in the context of oxidative stress induced Parkinson's disease. MAO-B inhibitors have got a very good role to play. There is one neurotoxin which is known as MPTP, that is 1-methyl 4-phenyl 1236 tetrahydropyridine. In short, we call it as MPTP. It is actually a neurotoxin, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it gets oxidized to 1-methyl 4-phenyl pyridinium, or in short we can call it as MPP plus, by MAO-B enzyme. And this MPP plus is taken up by the dopaminergic neurons via the dopamine transporter, and it selectively destroys the nigrostriatal neurons. So it inhibits mitochondrial oxidation reactions and produces oxidative stress. So the thing that you need to remember is that this neurotoxin, that is MPTP, is getting converted into MPP plus, and this MPP plus is entering the brain through the dopamine transporter, and it is destroying the nigrostriatal neurons. So the enzyme that is responsible for converting MPTP into MPP plus is MAO-B enzyme. Are you getting my point? There is one more hypothesis in which the role of MAO enzyme is there. It is the oxidative stress hypothesis. It says that the metabolism of dopamine by MAO actually produces the hydrogen peroxide. And normally, in a normal healthy person, glutathione actually breaks down this hydrogen peroxide very quickly. But if a patient has got reduced glutathione, these hydrogen peroxide will not be broken down, and these will lead to cell damage. So this oxidative stress hypothesis, it actually proposes that the dopamine cell death is actually caused by the reactive free radicals produced by the catabolism of dopamine. So somehow if you can reduce the formation of this hydrogen peroxide, you can reduce the damage produced by these reactive free radicals. So if you inhibit MAO-B, one thing you can do, you can prevent the conversion of MPTP to MPP plus. The other thing, as per the oxidative stress hypothesis, is that you can also prevent the generation of hydrogen peroxide free radicals. So as per these hypotheses, there is a role of MAO-B inhibitors in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. Have you understood? So you can use MAO-B inhibitors as an adjunct to levodopa plus carbidopa in advanced cases of Parkinson's disease to prolong the effect of levodopa plus carbidopa, or to reduce the dosage of levodopa plus carbidopa, or to reduce the motor fluctuation. And overall, the idea is to, as far as possible, decrease the wearing of phenomenon or the on-off phenomenon. Apart from that, we have also understood the role of MAO-B inhibitor in protection from the MPTP induced Parkinson's disease, or from the free radical induced oxidative stress Parkinson's disease. The next category of drug, we call it as dopamine facilitator. It is amantadine. Now what this amantadine does, it inhibits the reuptake of dopamine, and it also influences the presynaptic synthesis and release of dopamine. It is primarily being used as an antiviral agent in the treatment of influenza A. Apart from it inhibiting the reuptake or enhancing the release and synthesis of dopamine, it has also got anticholinergic activity of its own, and it modulates the NMDA glutamate receptor. Increases the synthesis and release of dopamine, and it also inhibits the reuptake of dopamine. So if you can inhibit the reuptake of dopamine, there will be more amount of dopamine available for producing the therapeutic action. So it can be used as an adjunct to levodopa and carbidopa in the later stages of Parkinson's disease, or you can use it in early or mild cases of Parkinson's disease. In the late cases of or in the later stages of Parkinson's disease, it actually helps in reducing the dose related fluctuations or dyskinesia, or the reducing the chances of wearing of phenomenon. But one problem with amantadine is that it can lead to a rare side effect which is known as libido reticularis. As you can see in this picture, libido reticularis is actually characterized by a mottled reticulated vascular pattern that appears like a lace-like purplish discoloration of the lower limbs. But fortunately, it clears after stopping the drug, or it clears within a month after stopping the drug. Now we have discussed the role of drugs which enhances the effect of dopamine. So one broad category of drug we have discussed. The second broad category of drug was drug which decreases the activity of enhanced cholinergic activity. So in this we have centrally acting anticholinergic drugs. Briefly we had discussed the role of centrally acting anticholinergic drugs while we were discussing the drug induced Parkinsonism in the antipsychotic class. Do you remember? See, if you use antipsychotic drugs, you are basically blocking the D2 receptors, particularly with the typical antipsychotics. So what we have seen in the basal ganglia, there is a delicate balance between dopamine and acetylcholine. So if you inhibit dopamine, there will be overactivity of the acetylcholine. So the deficiency of dopamine will actually lead to augmentation of excitatory cholinergic activity. So if you block this increased cholinergic activity by using centrally acting anticholinergic drugs, you can give relief to the patient as far as the motor symptoms are concerned. And what has been seen that with centrally acting anticholinergic drug, there is more pronounced improvement in the tremor compared to bradykinesia or rigidity. See, with levodopa and carbidopa, what we were noticing that rigidity, bradykinesia was improving much earlier. On prolonged uses, tremor was also reducing. But as far as postural instability was concerned, we were not seeing much of a improvement with the usage of levodopa and carbidopa. In contrast to levodopa and carbidopa, centrally acting anticholinergic drug, you give or you notice more pronounced relief in the resting tremor or in the Parkinsonian tremor compared to bradykinesia or rigidity. So among the anticholinergics, we prefer the drugs which have got higher central action compared to the peripheral anticholinergic action. So we use drugs such as trihexyphenidyl, benzoxol, procyclidine, bipyridine. There is a spelling mistake in the trihexyphenidyl. Please ignore that. So remember, the centrally acting anticholinergic drugs are the drug of choice for drug-induced Parkinsonism. Why we not use or why we don't prefer levodopa and carbidopa in drug-induced Parkinsonism? Yes, there is already blockade of dopamine receptor. You have the patient is on, say for example, patient is on typical antipsychotic drug, which is actually blocking the D2 receptor. So you won't get the desired benefit. And this blockade of D2 receptor is actually tilting the balance or tilting the delicate balance between dopamine and acetylcholine in the favor of acetylcholine. So you need to decrease that elevated acetylcholine activity for giving the relief to the patient. But with the usage of centrally acting anticholinergic drugs, you have to be aware about the problems that the anticholinergic drugs can lead to. You should avoid prescribing centrally acting anticholinergic drugs in patients suffering from narrow angle or narrow iridocorneal angle. Patients or with patients suffering from prostatic hyperplasia. So to summarize the pharmacotherapy of Parkinson's disease, how you will start the treatment? See, what we have seen with the chronic usage of levodopa and carbidopa, say for example after 2 or 3 years of levodopa and carbidopa, usually we start noticing the wearing of phenomenon, on off phenomenon, and Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder. It is a progressive disorder. Unfortunately, we don't have any definitive therapeutic modality which can halt the progression of the disease. So as far as possible, we have to provide the symptomatic relief to the patient. And Parkinson's disease, we have seen that it is characterized by both motor manifestations as well as non-motor manifestations. And among motor manifestations, we have seen that there is resting tremor, rigidity, bradykinesia, postural instability. Now with the use of levodopa and carbidopa, we can give relief to the patient as far as bradykinesia is concerned, or as far as rigidity is concerned, on prolonged usage, we can also improve tremor, but we cannot improve the postural instability because of involvement of other neurotransmitter in that manifestation. But the thing is, with prolonged usage of levodopa and carbidopa, the problems of wearing of phenomenon, dyskinesia appears. So one way of the treatment modality is to delay the starting of levodopa and carbidopa as far as possible. It is better to start with drugs such as dopamine agonist, and then once you have started with dopamine agonist, monitor the patient, see the improvement in sign and symptoms, and if there is inadequate response, then you can add levodopa and carbidopa. But the thing is, if you start levodopa and carbidopa, with carbidopa you are inhibiting the peripheral decarboxylation of levodopa to dopamine, but this levodopa will get metabolized through the COMT to 3-O-methyl dopa 3-OMD, and this 3-OMD and levodopa will compete for crossing the blood-brain barrier. So one thing you can do later on, say for example, if the patient is on dopamine agonistic drug, there is subsequently there is inadequate response, you have started levodopa plus carbidopa, and after chronic therapy with levodopa and carbidopa, you have started noticing the wearing of phenomenon. So either you can increase the dosage of levodopa and carbidopa, or you can increase the frequency of administration of levodopa and carbidopa. But the problem is that if you increase the dosage of levodopa and carbidopa or increase the frequency of levodopa and carbidopa, the chances of dyskinesia or the appearance of the involuntary movements will be there. So it is better to add either COMT inhibitor or MAO-B inhibitor. Are you getting my point? It's a sort of step-wise treatment that you can stick to. As an adjunct therapy, you can add an anticholinergic or centrally acting anticholinergic drug, because we have seen that centrally acting anticholinergic drug, it provides or it relieves Parkinsonian tremor better compared to the other drugs. Or if drug induced dyskinesia appears, you can add amantadine. And if a stage comes where in a patient is not responding to the medical therapy, then surgical options can be considered as a last option. So how you can uh, describe the treatment modalities of Parkinson's disease? Start with dopamine agonistic drug. In dopamine agonistic, we have seen there are ergot derivative, whereas non-ergot derivative, it is better to go with the non-ergot derivative. Then if there is inadequate control, then add levodopa plus carbidopa. Then subsequently, if there is inadequate control or if wearing of phenomena start appearing, you can increase the doses of levodopa and carbidopa, or you can administer levodopa and carbidopa more frequently. And as a next step, you can go for either COMT inhibitor or MAO-B inhibitor. And as an adjunct to the therapy, you can look for anticholinergics or amantadine like drug. But remember, for drug-induced Parkinsonism, the treatment protocol is different. For the drug-induced Parkinsonism, there is no role of levodopa and carbidopa. For drug-induced Parkinsonism, which is the drug of choice, centrally acting anticholinergics. Okay? Thank you.